Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Mumble Mumble regular Fear Brown Bag, first one of this semester. Fear Brown Bags is a regular, irregular, who knows. We do it every now and then, talk where we get people from our program, full-time and adjunct faculty to talk about things that might be of interest to the wider the wider campus community. So I see many of you have got the brown bag message, where I guess we should call it takeout tray at this point, because people don't really eat from brown bags. But fear, politics, history, international relations, takeout tray talk about Iran. So for those of you who don't know me, which most of you do, but some of you don't, I am Professor Willy Logan. I am the program director of the Politics, History, and International Relations program, or FEAR, as we like to call it. We live in fear. We have nothing to fear but fear itself, and so forth. All the jokes. Yes, we can use them. So this talk is called From Iran, from Imperial State to Islamic Republic. Let's see if this clicker works. Okay, went one slide forward. Oh, man. Okay, and then it went one slide forward, and then went a bunch of slides forward. So what you see here, anybody know what these flags are? The one on the right is the current flag of Iran, the Islamic Republic of Iran. Anybody know what the one on the left is? That is when it was under the Shah. That's correct. The lion and sun flag. Very good. And a flag or a version of that flag is still used today by like Iranian groups who are opposed to the Islamic Republic. So I'm going to give you some historical and geographical background about Iran, which everybody should know these days, and we all know why we should know it. And I'm going to be talking about the 20th century. I'm a 20th century historian. And I'm going to talk about especially how Iran transferred from a pro-Western imperial state, so that's the lion and sun flag, to the anti-Western Islamic Republic that we know about today. So really what I'm trying to explain here, what I hope you get from this talk is what Iran has against the United States and what the United States has against Iran. So a little bit of geographical background. I always like to start with this. So Iran is otherwise known as Persia. It is a country in southwestern Asia, and it's usually considered part of the Middle East. It's the easternmost country of the Middle East. That's kind of an arbitrary division. I think it's just as useful to think of it as between the Middle East and South Asia. The Middle East, except for Turkey, speaks Arabic. South Asia speaks lots of different languages. So as you can see in this not too terribly dated map, it borders Turkey and Iraq to the west. Here, I'll use the pointer. I'll use the mouse. So Turkey and Iraq to the west, Azerbaijan and Armenia to the north. By the way, that is Azerbaijan. That and that. It's like a little two-part country there. And Turkmenistan to the north, and then Afghanistan and Pakistan to the east. There's also long coastline on the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman down here, and then there's the coastline or shoreline, I guess, along the Caspian Sea to the north. One thing I want to point out is, so Iran and Iraq are countries that are next to each other. The spelling of their names is almost identical in English. This is one letter off. Like N and Q are pretty close to each other in the alphabet, and that is just a coincidence because Iraq is that's the old Arabic name for that part of the world, and Iran is a Persian word, which is totally unrelated to Arabic, and they're spelled differently in the Nastaliq and the Naqsh scripts. So the scripts for those, so for Persian and Arabic, spell them completely differently. So they don't start with the same letter as they do in English. So Iran is mountainous and it's arid. look at it on Google Maps, and you have to zoom way in to see the trees. There are trees, and because the mountains are mountainous country in the west and the north, that's where most of the people live. That's where it's a little less arid. There's a little more water. Most of the rest of the country is scrubland or desert. And there is some arable land. This is a cradle of civilization going way back to ancient times. There are various crops have been cultivated there since antiquity. One crop, interestingly, that was first cultivated in Iran was grapes, and Iran was the first country, or well, Persia or whatever, was the first place where wine was produced. Which is kind of ironic considering the history of the more recent history of Iran. I used to teach at our sister institution, Pacific Union College in California, in the Napa County, and there is a winery that is made to look like the old Persian capital of Persepolis. It's founded by an Iranian expat who got rich making running grocery stores in California. And the first time I spotted it when I was driving down to Napa, I recognized it immediately and almost crashed the car. Because how surprised I was. Okay, so Iran's greatest natural resource, at least for the last 100 plus years, is oil. So there's huge oil fields that straddle the Iran and Iraq border. This is one of the world's most productive regions for petroleum. There's also oil along the Persian Gulf coast. So on this map, the green is oil and the red is natural gas, which of course is another important energy resource. And oil is so the oil is all drilled here. Oil and natural gas is drilled here, and then it's loaded onto tankers, and it's shipped out through this area here, which is called the Strait of Hormuz. Which is a choke point. So it's kind of easy to block the Strait of Hormuz, and that disrupts oil supply. So what about the people who live in Iran? Iran has a large population, estimated at 92 million people. So it's a little less than a third the size of the United States. It's the 17th largest country in the world. And the population, as you might guess from a country that is arid, that's, not a ton of arable land, the population is predominantly urban. So there are some big cities. The largest city and the capital is Tehran, which has more than 9 million people in it. So, that's bigger than New York City. Ethnic distribution of Iran is the majority is Persian, or they're Persian or Farsi speakers. So that is the modern form of the language that's been spoken in that part of the world since ancient times. They're the majority, but they're not a huge majority. They're 61%. So it's not anywhere near an overwhelming majority, which ironically is exactly the same percentage of white Anglo in this country. So there's a majority population, and then there's a bunch of other people as well. So let's see. So Farsi, it's an Indo-European language, which means that it is distantly related to English, English and German and Spanish and Latin and most of the European languages you can think of, except for Basque, and a couple others. It is not in any way related to Arabic. So even though it's written with a similar script, it's not the same script. It's Nastaliq rather than Naqsh. It's not in any way related to Arabic. It is the ethnic Persian or Iranian people are not Arabs. They'll tell you that if you ask them. But as I said, so the 61% are Persian or Farsi speakers, and then there are lots of other ethnicities. Azeris, Kurds, and now I just told you that Iranians are not Arabs, but guess what? There are Arabs living in Iran as well. It is about 2% of the population, which sounds like, oh, that's not a very big number. Yeah, well, 2%, of 92 million is a big number. It's 1.6 million people who are actually ethnic Arabs. As for religion, Iran is overwhelmingly Muslim. It's 98% Muslim, so overwhelmingly Muslim, and most of the Muslims, almost all the Muslims, 90% of them are Shia, which is a minority in most of the rest of the Islamic world, but it's a very strong majority there. And then there are tiny minorities of non-Muslims, tiny communities of Christians, Baha'i, Zoroastrians, Jews. So, okay. With that geographical background out of the way, let's start our story. Now, our story begins in the 20th century, but I need to give a little background, so I'm going to start with the 19th century, like you do. Now, in the 19th century, Iran was still called Persia by the outside world. So Iran had been called Persia since like the 5th century BC, really. Anybody know Herodotus? Oh man, my man Herodotus. I love Herodotus. If you take the ancient history class from me, I'll just like drill Herodotus into you, and until you just give in and buy the Pigment Classic Edition to read it. So Herodotus called it Persia. It comes from Fars, which is the province where these the Persians first came from. But the Persians never called themselves Persians. They never called themselves. They never called their country Persia. It was always Iran, ever since ancient times. So in the 19th century, there were two big imperial powers that were on the borders of Persia, as they called it, and competing over influence in Persia. And those powers were Russia and Britain. So Russia was a territorial empire that was expanding across Eurasia, and they'd gotten to the northern border of Persia. And then Britain, of course, ruled India. Britain had an overseas empire, and you say, but wait, Iran doesn't border India now. That's true. But Pakistan was a part of India until 1947, until independence and partition. So they both have borders with Persia, and Persia is the next place that they want to exploit. I mean, there's no better word for it. They want to get as much advantage out of Persia as they can. So this competition for influence in Afghanistan and Persia is what's known as the Great Game. Okay, so Rudyard Kipling wrote a novel about it, Kim. Okay, my three English professors here are knowing it. It's kind of a bit of a slog to read, if I'm being honest. But Persia was split between a Russian concession, so a place where the Russians get to their sphere of influence, that was in the north. The north was has borders with the Russian Empire. That's where most of the people live. And there was a British concession in the southeast, next to British India, where, okay, granted, there's not a whole lot. That's the even more arid part. And then there was a neutral zone in between. Now, during this period, Persia had its own government. It had its own ruling dynasty called the Qajar dynasty. Qajar dynasty, for those of you who are taking notes. And the Qajar dynasty, they were ineffectual. They could not really exercise full sovereignty because the Russians and the British were just meddling way too much in Persian affairs. For example, neither power wanted Persia to have railroads. This is the 19th century. Everybody wants railroads. I mean, the British are going nuts building railroads in India. And they don't want Persia to have railroads because then Persia could defend itself more easily if it's attacked. So no railroads for Persia. And so guess what? None get built because neither of those countries want Persia to have railroads. So the great game competition for Persia was a double-edged sword. I mean, it mostly cut one direction, but it did prevent Persia from being colonized outright by one of the powers because both powers wanted it, and so That makes Persia nearly unique in the world. I mean, most countries outside of Europe got colonized by Europeans between 1500 and 1950. Iran, Afghanistan, Thailand, Ethiopia, take your pick, just a few other examples. But the other aspect of the competition was that it kept Persia from modernizing or developing. So this thing's getting in my way. I'm going to push it back. Okay, meanwhile, oil was discovered in southwestern Persia. It's early 20th century. It just so happens that the British Navy is converting their fleet from burning coal to burning oil. And Britain industrialized by using its domestic coal resources. But they didn't have any domestic petroleum resources. So what are they going to do? This discovery of oil in Persia was very convenient for them. There was a little problem, and the problem was that the oil fields were outside of the British concession. Because remember, it's the British concession in southeast Persia. The oil fields are in southwest Persia. Well, never fear, the British will just expand their concession to embrace the oil fields, and they start a company, the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, which is made to exploit these oil resources. The British government got a majority share in 1914. Later it was renamed the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and this company still exists. And you've probably used it. British Petroleum, yes. Yep. So the last ruler of the Qajar dynasty was overthrown by a man named Reza Khan, who adopted the name Reza Shah Pahlavi. So his actual background is kind of murky. It's not even clear where he was from, what ethnicity he was. But what matters is he was a military leader, and he was initially supported by the British. And so the British helped facilitate his rise to power, and he wasn't sure exactly what he wanted to do at first. This is the 20th century. It's a period of the hot new time. Well, it's not really not that new, but the hot form of you want to have a republic. Like the 20th century, government should be republican. So he tried to create a republic, and he failed. And so he thought, well, I guess I'll just be king. So he made himself king. Shah is just the Persian word for king, and he founded a dynasty, the Pahlavi dynasty, which that was not his name. He just adopted that name. He just made it up. He didn't make it up, but he adopted it as his own name. And this dynasty, a storied dynasty that ruled through the generations for two rulers. And I'll tell you about both of them. So one of the things that Reza Shah did was he really worked hard to modernize his country and to make it secular. So all kinds of reforms that he did included building up the military. Of course, if you're going to have a strong country, you've got to have a strong military, and that means buying weapons from Europe, right? So he imported a lot of arms from Europe. You have to connect the country together. What didn't get built in the 19th century? Railroads, yes. And so what gets built in the 20th century? Railroads, yes. And when I was working on this talk, I found a website advertising package tours to Iran, where you can ride the Trans-Iranian Railroad. It looks really cool. Nobody do it right now. They didn't have like a. I was expecting a banner like our reservations are currently on hold. I didn't see that. Something else he did was import substitution industrialization. So rather than importing stuff, let's make it domestically. This is and not really complicated stuff. Largely processing agricultural products like tobacco, sugar. a textile manufacturer. He wanted to expand education, so he built a ton of schools. He built them all over the country at all levels. He founded the first university in Tehran, and it was actually a gender-inclusive education. So he made girls' schools as well, lots of girls' schools, and something that he thought really kept his country in the past were some traditions like the veil. Women wearing a veil over this face. So we banned it. It's like, no, you can't wear a veil over your face. And it wasn't just for women. He's not just mandating how women dress. He's also mandating how men dress. So men have to dress in Western style. Like, I don't want to see any traditional Iranian clothes. You got to wear like a Western coat. And at one point, he even required that you had to wear a Western style hat. So if you're a man, you better go out and buy a fedora or a bowler real quick, because that's mandatory. All kinds of words, non-Persian words had come into the language in hundreds of years. And so he tried to purge those non-Persian words from the language. And another important change is he ordered that any other country, has to refer to his country not as Persia, but as Iran. So 1935 is when the international name for Persia officially changes to Iran. And he's signaling a break from the dark days of the Qajar period, when Russians and the British just exploited Persia for all it was worth. Like, nope, we're not that anymore. We're it's like new century, new name, new branding, right? There's like rebranding the country. Now, the reforms were not complete. Reza Shah is comparable to Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, who did similar reforms in Turkey after the Ottoman Empire fell apart. One of the things that Ataturk did that Reza Shah didn't do was Romanize the script. Because Reza Shah just didn't do that. They just continued to use the Nastaliq, which is the traditional script they'd used for hundreds of years, which they still use. And Reza Shah was not able to do anything about the British exploiting their national resource. So the British continued to drill for oil in Iran. And one other change was he made no moves toward democracy. He just ruled as a dictator, and that was that. Despite and because of these changes, Reza Shah had little support among the Iranian public by the end of the 1930s. So then what happens in the 1940s? World War II, yes. So World War II starts, and World War II, we think about World War II in Europe and in the Pacific, because that's where we pay the most attention to it. World War II was also fought in the Middle East. The Middle East was an important strategic concern for World War II. The Middle East and North Africa, the Allies were afraid of Nazi incursions into the Middle East. And so the British just started occupying as much territory as they could. They already occupied Palestine, and they had troops in Egypt. Then they occupied Iraq because there was an anti-British revolt there. They occupied Lebanon and Syria, which were ruled by the Vichy France. That was the puppet regime that the Nazis set up in France, and so they just took it over. Then they occupied Iran. Like, why not? Both the British and the Russians occupied Iran because let's just collect everything, like collect the whole set, right? And so this was not approved by the Iranian government. At first, the Iranian military offered token resistance, and they did for 3 days. And then Reza Shah said, like, okay, we're not going to win this. Stand down. The British and the Russians can come in. Reza Shah himself was forced to abdicate, and he was succeeded by his son, Mohammad Reza Shah, which I said there were 2 members of the dynasty. This is the second member of the dynasty. And in 1942, another power comes to help occupy Iran. Anybody care to guess which power that was? Yes. Us, yes. U.S., yeah. Yes, the U.S., the United States of America. So why, aside from keeping the Nazis out and oil, delicious, tasty oil, what was the strategic significance or the unique strategic significance of Iran was that it was an overland route to Russia. So between territory held by the Western Allies and territory held by, or yeah, part of this is the Soviet Union now, which is basically the same, the same borders as the Russian Empire, and so the Western Allies could send supplies to Russia over through Iran. Difficult, grueling overland journey, but hey, at least you're not getting shot at by the Germans or the Japanese. So at the end of the war, of the three powers who were occupying Iran, the U.S. ended up looking the best. So let's pat ourselves on the back for that. Because the British were already discredited because they'd been exploiting Iran for decades, just like drilling, taking out oil. The Soviet Union was unpopular, for one, because of the past under the Qajar dynasty, and two, because at the end of the war, the Allies said we're going to pull out of Iran 6 months after the war is over, and Russia says, well, maybe we won't pull out of a part of Iran. We won't pull out of the Azerbaijan part of Iran because we have part of Azerbaijan in the Soviet Union, and we could just keep it. And they didn't. Ultimately, they did pull out, but that made them look really bad. That made them look especially bad. But nothing wrong with the Americans. So the Americans looking pretty good, and lots of American technical advisors are brought in after the war. Whoops. Oh, I guess I forgot to. Okay. So this is that's a cartoon of the British and the Soviet Union occupying Iran. Meanwhile, there's another political player in the story, and that's Mohammad Mossadegh. He was growing in popularity and power. He was an Iranian politician who was a longtime opponent of the Shah. Iran had a legislative body called the Majlis, Mossadegh led a coalition in the Majlis called the National Front. He was pushing for the nationalization of the oil industry. This was a lot of countries were doing this as part of decolonization. Let's get our national resources under control. The first country to nationalize their oil industry was Mexico. Just before World War II, the British freaked out, the Americans freaked out, and then World War II happened, and everybody was distracted. And then Mexico became an ally, and we're like, okay, it's fine. Mossadegh was pushing like, hey, this is an Iranian national resource. It should be controlled by Iran, and so he pushed the Majlis to vote for nationalization, which they did in 1951, and then he was appointed prime minister shortly afterward. So he's top of his game, growing in influence and power, trying to remake Iran, make it more independent, and then one thing leads to another, and he is overthrown in a coup. And the coup was backed by British intelligence and the CIA, yes, the Central Intelligence Agency. And then after the coup, the U.S. propped up the Shah as their pro-Western ruler of Iran, and he was supported unequivocally until he was overthrown. More than 20 years later. So Mossadegh had been popular across the Iranian population. And so remember how I said that Americans were popular after World War II? Well, that comes to an end. Like our approval ratings go way down. They go into the tank. They tank after the rains. After some fits and starts, this oil revenue starts rolling in. And the Iranian economy starts to boom. So they got all this money coming into the country, and the Shah says, I'm going to spend this money on developing my country. This is what's called the White Revolution. So he expands industry, he builds up healthcare and education, and he builds something that every mid-20th century modernizer has to build in their country. What was that? No, modernizer. What's modern? Big. Huge. Made out of concrete. No. See, we're so far removed from the mid-20th century, we don't even know this. Dams, yes, thank you. Yes, has to build dams. And then, of course, he spends a lot of money on the military. And guess where those weapons are coming from? United States, yeah. Not just the U.S. He's also getting chieftain tanks from Britain. But he gets F-14 Tomcat fighters. Turn and burn, in thrust we trust. All right, glad some of you got that reference. That was a Top Gun reference for those of you who didn't get it. And that's the original Top Gun. Those planes have been retired for years now. Expensive, hard to use, hard to maintain. So now at this time, a lot of Americans are living in Tehran. There's a whole ton of Americans living in Tehran. They're involved in business. They're trying to get rich off the country, and they just want to live a really lavish lifestyle. It's like their dollars go so much farther in Tehran than they do at home. The Americans were segregated away from the Iranian population. There are American schools all over the world, but the American school in Tehran was probably unique in that in order to attend the school, you had to have a U.S. passport. So, because other American schools, people with enough money to pay for tuition, sure, let's send them to the American school. Let's let them learn American English, whatever. It's like, oh, are you a U.S. citizen and carrying a U.S. passport? Oh, sorry, you can't come. There was also an American hospital. They had eventually, after a long time, they hired a handful of Iranian nurses, and they couldn't eat in the cafeteria. They had to eat in the janitor's closet. They had to eat their lunch there, and it was only for Americans or foreigners. So there was one case where a boy was hit by a car right in front of the hospital, on the street, right in front of the hospital. So his dad picks him up and carries him to the hospital, and they say, oh, sorry, this is not for Iranians. You have to go to a different hospital. So, how do you think the Iranians felt about all this? Yeah, the American presence in Iran was resented by the mass of the Iranian population. So this is a picture of Mohammad Reza Shah. He was an American ally. He's standing up to communists during the Cold War. Who's he with? Richard Nixon. Do you know where he is in that picture? It's not. Nope. Yeah, it's Washington, D.C. That's the executive office building in the background. It's one of the few buildings that's doesn't have the neoclassical architecture on it. And I love the picture on the left because it's just so exaggerated. It's like a ruler's legitimacy is inversely proportional to the size of the medals on his chest. Mohammad Reza Shah was also isolated from the Iranian people. He'd been educated in Switzerland. He didn't have a lot of firsthand experience with Iran. And when he was ruling as Shah, he would fly around in a helicopter, and he would appear in public in a bulletproof glass box. So, like the Pope Mobile, yeah. And so, of course, he was very unpopular among the people. He was getting increasingly unpopular and he didn't know how to deal with dissent, and so the only thing he knew how to do was to punish it with repression. So he had a secret police to hunt down opponents of the regime. I was talking with my parents over the weekend, and they lived through all this, on this side of the world. But they said that Iranian expats would demonstrate against the Shah in the U.S. and they would demonstrate with paper bags over their head so they couldn't be identified because they were afraid of getting taken out by the secret police. In this country, yes. One especially influential critic of the Shah was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, who was a religious leader. So Ayatollah is a religious leader. There's lots of Ayatollahs in Iran. He was one of them. But he criticized the Shah. He criticized the U.S. He criticized the Shah's weakness against the U.S. And so he was outspoken. And what do you think happened to him? He wasn't killed, actually, kind of surprisingly, but he was arrested. He was arrested multiple times, and after multiple arrests, I guess he was too important to actually be killed, so he was exiled. So he bounced around a little while, for a couple of times. He ended up in Paris. So meanwhile, protests against the Shah get bigger and bigger and bigger. So the leaders are gone, or that leader's gone anyway, but the people are still there. You can't exile all the people. And so big protests happen on the street. 1977, 1978, they get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then what do you suppose the Shah does about the protests? He arrests them. What else do you suppose he does? He shoots them. Yeah, like police line firings. Yes, this is the thing. So he guns down protesters, and then there's this 40-day period of mourning. So everybody's mourning for 40 days, and then after 40 days, they hit the streets again, and they get shot. And there's another period. It's like this cycle that repeats and repeats and repeats, and every time the protests get bigger. So finally, oh man. Yeah, I know. See, I wasn't even touching it. Yeah. Yeah. So finally, the Shah fled the country on January 16, 1979, and Khomeini returned to Iran on February 1. There you can see him coming down the steps from his Air France 747 jumbo jet. As many as 3 million people showed up at Tehran airport to welcome Khomeini's plane. So he took control of the government. He executed members of the old regime, those who weren't able to flee. And then he turned to attack leftist opponents within Iran, because there were lots of different ideologies represented in the opposition to the Shah. He was on the right. He was a conservative. So he attacked, tried to liquidate leftist opponents as well. And the Shah died the next year. He was already sick from cancer. The public didn't know it in Iran, but he was already sick, and died the next year in Cairo. The Iranian Revolution took a more radical turn in November 1979 when the U.S. Embassy in Tehran was sieged and hostages were taken. 66 Americans were taken hostage, and they were held for more than a year. The U.S., what does the great military power do when their highly profile citizens are taken hostage? Well, they try to rescue them. So they rescue them. They send helicopters to rescue them. The helicopters crash, and it's a huge failure. Finally, the hostages were released in January 1981, just moments before Jimmy Carter left office. President Carter left office. So that's the picture on the left is one of the hostages being taken with his face covered up. On the right, that is students, like people your guys' age, climbing over the fence to take over the embassy compound, which under international law, this is it's sovereign territory of the U.S., right? So that's a major violation, and they so that the building was seized, and now it's a museum, and it's a museum. I can't remember the exact name of it, but it's like a museum against the imperial domination of America, or something like that. Something very, very dramatic. In the courtyard, they have parts of the crashed helicopter. Yeah. All right, so the hostage crisis made Americans really hate Iran. And it was covered ad nauseum on TV news with a running tally every day. So they would say, like on the news, they would say what day of the hostage crisis it was every single day. Through the rest of 1979, through all of 1980, and into the first month of 1981. Walter Cronkite was the anchor of CBS Evening News, and he was like the most respected man in America for a generation. And so he would sign off his broadcasts every day, and this is the way it is. Such and such a day, 1979, the blank number, day of captivity for the American hostages in Iran. And then it would cut to the logo. So everybody knew, every single day they would know. So that picture is from the one on the left is from New York, where it's on one of the bridges. Somebody's kept a running tally, and so that's once it's been a year. Like somebody took that picture, the hostage crisis also inspired ethnic hatred against Iranians in the U.S. There were plenty of Iranians here. They were just kind of there. It was just like another group of people, whatever, who really cares. But then there was a lot of ethnic hatred against them, as you can see on the guy on the right. The Iranians who were in the U.S. in 1979, 1980, were there because they didn't like the way things were in Iran, and so they were fleeing repression. They were not their oppressors. So some Iranians just decided to change their ethnicity. It's like, oh, I'm Italian. Just call me Vinny. Seriously. So it was like the hostage crisis was a big deal. I think it was fairly widely supported at the time, but most Iranians now think it was a mistake. And I'd say they're right. It definitely was a mistake. So the dust has barely settled from the Iranian Revolution when Iraq invades Iran. So the dictator of Iraq was Saddam Hussein, who had just recently come into full power in Iran, and he had in Iraq, yes, in Iraq. He had a reputation for getting himself into costly wars with his neighbors, and this was the first one. He invaded the oil-rich Khuzestan province. So there was lots of oil wells there. It was next to the border of Iraq, and guess what kind of people live there? Arabs. Yes, that's where a lot of the ethnic Arabs live. So Iran was not prepared. They were taken off guard. They initially lost some territory, but then they're able to get their footing. They're able to mobilize and push back the Iraqi military. By the summer of 1982, 1980 is when the war started. 1982, Iran has regained their lost territory, and then they're pretty evenly matched, and it becomes a war of attrition. Well, not exactly evenly matched. Iraq had a good military. They were importing a lot of arms. Iran had imported arms, but it wasn't importing arms now. Nobody was selling them weapons now, so they had all these older, like American and British, tanks and planes. They couldn't get spare parts for them, so they just had to sort of make do with what they could. So Iran didn't have a lot of modern weapons. What does Iran have a lot of, aside from oil? Natural gas. And aside from natural gas? Aside from energy resources, what does Iran have a lot of? If you can think to the beginning. People. Iran has a lot of people. Boys were abducted off the streets from towns and sent into minefields to set off the mines and probably get killed themselves, or at least maimed, so that the regular troops could follow them. They talk about cannon fodder, huh? Minefield fodder. So Iran and Iraq just ended up bombing each other's capital cities. Like they didn't really have anything else they could do. They just like shot bombs and like dropped bombs and shot missiles at each other's capital cities. This is what's called the War of the Cities. The war also spilled over into the Persian Gulf because Iran and Iraq, both big oil-producing countries. And where's most of that oil go? Through the Persian Gulf and the Strait of Hormuz. Iraq has an oil pipeline, but aside from that, the oil pipeline that goes to the Mediterranean. But aside from that, the oil is going out through the Persian Gulf, and so Iran and Iraq attacked each other's shipping. They would bomb each other's or shoot missiles at each other's tankers, blowing them up. So other countries are worried, like, well, other countries have not intervened in this war, but they're worried about the oil. They're worried about this international energy source being threatened, and so they send ships. They send warships into the Gulf to protect shipping. One of those ships was the U.S. guided missile cruiser USS Vincennes, which in July 1988 tracked a plane and shot it down, which was a civilian airliner. 290 people were killed when it was an Iranian A300 Iran Air airliner. It's not clear exactly why this happened, but the Iranians believed it to be deliberate. Finally, in 1988, so later that year, Ayatollah Khomeini agreed to a UN-brokered ceasefire. The death toll of the war is impossible to know for sure, but maybe 500,000 people killed, with Iran having heavier losses, of course, because like their weapons were their people. The final settlement took place in 1990. At this point, Iraq is preoccupied with its next war with its neighbor on the other side, Kuwait. And so the settlement was on Iranian terms. The final prisoner exchange wasn't until like 2003. So imagine these people like imprisoned in the other person's country for 15 years. Okay, so Iran and the U.S. have been unable to come to terms even after 47 years after the revolution. So the U.S. is bitter about the hostage crisis. Iran is bitter about the Mossadegh coup and American support of the Shah. So this went on for a couple of decades. Then, kind of a world-changing event in 2001 were the 9/11 attacks on the U.S. This opened a window of opportunity for things to change. Ayatollah Khomeini, he was the one who was just killed, and his reformist president Khatami condemned the attacks. Candlelight vigils were held in Tehran in honor of the people who were killed in the World Trade Center. Iran helped in the war against the Taliban later in 2001. They helped to get, because there were different factions in Afghanistan. One of them was the Northern Alliance. And so Iran helped get the Northern Alliance on board for a framework for a post-Taliban Afghanistan. What does the U.S. do in response to all these olive branches being put out? Well, in 2002, President George W. Bush is like, once we've invaded Afghanistan, he says, there's an axis of evil. There's three countries that are supporting terrorists. They're causing problems around the world. We need to go after them next. They are North Korea, Iraq, and Iran. So rapprochement, like coming together after the axis of evil speech was increasingly unlikely. The big issue now, which I don't have any time to go into, maybe that will be the next talk, who knows, was the Iranian nuclear program. Iran started enriching uranium in 2012. You have to enrich uranium. It's a very expensive, very time-consuming process in order to make nuclear bombs. You need to for power plants, and then you enrich it a lot more to make nuclear bombs or use plutonium. And so the U.S. is trying to prevent them from getting the bomb. Start first with agreements and sanctions, and now apparently airstrikes, like bombing the living daylights out of Iran, blowing their petroleum storage tanks up and their water supply. So that is the end of my talk. Thank you all for coming. I appreciate having such a big audience for this talk. Anybody want to ask any questions or anything you want to talk about? We have a few minutes. Let's just go up to the hour. Oh, it's 12:30 according to that clock. So 1:30. 1:30 by the new time. Questions or comments? Or is I just that clear?
What are we doing right now?
That is the question. Well, it changes every day. At first, it's kill the leader so that the people can rise up and overthrow their government, but they're not organized to do that. So, and now it's to, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's been said in the last 20 minutes, or the last hour since I've been down here. Yes. Yeah.
So then, why are Iranians now against the Ayatollah?
Well, some of them have been against him from the beginning. So especially ones here who fled when he came, and they're and the rest who are against him are because so. I guess what I really didn't go into is I talked much about the repression of the Shah. The Ayatollah did the same thing, because it's the old adage, as much as things change, things stay the same. So it's like a new government. They're anti-Western. They're focused on their Islamic identity, but they're still incredibly repressive. So it's that kind of hey, we think we're going to have something new. Oh, it's just the prisons are still having people, are getting new people in them, and that yeah.
It's like secular versus religious.
Yes.
Too, right? So
Yes.
you have Western ideals swapped for extremely oppressive religious ideals. The way that you talked about Iran's modernization sounds almost exactly like Oman's modernization.
Okay.
Supported by the British. Not as much war, of course, not as much bloodshed.
Yeah.
But Oman is fairly politically stable and not too far from what we're talking about. Why did it work in Oman and not in Iran?
That's a good question. I don't know enough about Oman to ask that question.
I'm gonna have to research that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why it didn't work in Iran was because of the Shah. The Shah was awful.
Yeah.
And you can think of other terms to refer to the Shah. So, it was because the Shah had no legitimacy really. It was just like this sort of made-up dynasty. And so the Shah, by the way, the Shah has a son who's 65, and he is he's out there. He's makes a name. He was living in Virginia for a long time. I think now he lives in Paris. And he's like, oh, I want to be a leader of a provisional government, a transitional government, and they better not choose him. That's such a bad idea. Yeah, Bruce.
What do you think about the new Ayatollah?
I don't really. I mean, he just became Ayatollah yesterday, so.
Just a new one?
Yeah.
The next one?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, he seems kind of extreme.
Pretty much in the same mindset as his father?
Well, yeah, he's the son. I thought they were trying to get rid of monarchy, and so that's kind of bad. That's bad optics, as they would say in diplomat speak. Yeah.
Is Iran technically a theocracy, or is it just kind of an authoritarian with a kind of a coding, a painting of?
I mean, that's the question. Yeah, I think the book that I was reading to prepare for this talk, I think would go more toward the authoritarian, because religion is subservient to the interests of the state. Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. You first, and then Professor Cochran.
So with the prediction of like the Ukraine and Russian war, it was predicted to take like 2 weeks, but it's still going on.
Yeah.
So like, what's your thought on the one that's happening right now?
Well, it really depends on on what the administration here wants to do, and it's really just the administration. I mean, Congress didn't gave themselves not a say, and we don't have any say. And anybody here vote for war against Iran? I didn't get a chance to vote for war against Iran. So it depends on what the administration wants, and they don't know what they want. That's part of the problem. So possibilities are they're really obsessed with Iran, and they want to push to overthrow the military, which is possible, which would take an invasion. To really overthrow the current government would take an invasion. And the other is just adjusting their goals and sort of backing off and saying, oh my goodness, November's coming, midterm elections in November. Let's change this and focus on something else. But yeah, if they actually decide to overthrow, yeah, I mean that could take years, and maybe could not happen. Okay, Tanya, and then.
Is it ultimately about oil, or is it about personality right now? Because, what do we do? I just don't understand what we're doing.
Well, I don't either. I tell you,
It doesn't make any sense.
I think it's more about personality than anything.
It's very against promises that were made.
Oh yeah, the President of Peace.
For the administration
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
directly against what the
Yeah.
promises were. And it gets us involved in ways where we suffer, both through the economy, because the stock market tanked over the weekend, in the last several days.
Yeah.
Because of oil being
Limited.
from
Yeah.
moving because of the Gulf. It's people have died. Some of our soldiers
Yep.
already have died.
One.
What are we
Yeah.
actually getting out of this?
That is a great question. I will answer. I will get back to you in 30 years.
Well, okay, that's all a rhetorical question.
Yeah. Okay. Last question.
Since I guess I'm saying are the countries that are being kind of stepped on in this exchange between Iran and the United States, since Iran is bombing the U.S. military in Dubai and then the Middle East, the UAE, do those countries have maybe hey, we're going to what is going on? We're going to defend ourselves, or we're going to step into this? What happens with those countries?
Yeah, they're. I mean, I guess they're officially at war with Iran. If anybody's officially at war at this point, nothing's been declared. And they, I mean, yeah, there's long been uneasiness. Iran, I mean, the Arab states to the west of Iran haven't liked Iran for a long time. The west and south of Iran haven't liked Iran for a long time, especially since 1979. So yeah, I mean, I think they're in a state of conflict, I guess, with Iran as well. A lot of these countries, I mean, have a large American military presence anyway. So they're not gonna these tiny little Gulf states aren't gonna invade Iran. They don't have the manpower for that.
But we have people that we know actually who are in those locations. So an alum of Union who is at our university in Lebanon, talking to Amy Shepard McHenry. She says they're safe, but they can hear all the bombing. And a lot of their classes have gone online. I have a good friend in Dubai who told me that they've all been told to stay home. They've bombed Oman.
Yeah.
Oman can't really respond, but they're sending those messages.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a definite threat.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm happy to stand around and talk. I'll let people go if they need to go, but I'm happy to stand around and talk. And hope you guys liked it. Do you want more? Thank you.